Hello friends, welcome back to True Love Stories Hub. I'm no longer monetized by YouTube, so if you like my content and want to support me, please check out my Patreon. Thank you so much for being a regular viewer of the channel. Married people who were cheated on. How did you find out? My ex-wife really wanted to have a baby. She was in her mid-30s, so she was kind of running out of time. We tried, but it did not happen as fast as she wanted. After more than a month of not being intimate, which in retrospect should have been a big red flag, she came home one day, took all her things and just left. Only after she was gone did she eventually admit to me that she had gone and gotten herself pregnant by another man. We got divorced. By the way, the other man was someone she had not known well, and he wanted nothing to do with the child. She is raising it now as a single mother. That was her choice. Story 2. I was oblivious to it all for a long time. Keep in mind that we lived in a small town of 5,000 people, so people know things. I was bragging about my now ex-wife to a coworker, saying how proud I was of her for finally getting a job she loved after being a stay-at-home mom for about the last 8 years. I mentioned that she was working as a ranch hand on a few weekend-long cattle drives, staying in the bunkhouse of the cattle ranch. My coworker said she knew that ranch, having only lived a few miles from there, and that there was no bunkhouse. The only residence was a single house where the ranch lead hand lived by himself. That really confused me. I asked my ex about it, and she denied it up and down, explaining everything. A few weeks later, another person I knew in town mentioned being surprised that my ex-wife was at home. They thought we were split up. It turned out that the man she had been seeing was this person's cousin. Their cousin had shared all sorts of graphic details about what he and my ex-wife had been doing, and now they were telling me. I kept saying things like, "No way. They must be talking about someone else." Faced with this new information, I confronted my now ex-wife just outside our house while the kids were inside. She initially tried denying it again, but finally came clean. I was absolutely gutted. I was a grown man crying uncontrollably in my laneway, and she got in her truck and drove off to be with him that night, leaving me and the kids at home. I could barely eat or sleep for days. The only thing that kept me sane during my waking hours was my kids. I focused on keeping everything as calm and stable as possible for them. They saved me. It has been about 9 years now. I have not been in a committed relationship since, and I do not know if I ever will be again. Story 3. I had suspected it earlier, but nothing was solid, so I never brought it up. He did not realize that the Apple devices were synced together, and one day I was using one of the devices for something when messages started popping up in real time. I got to read their conversation as it was happening, as well as past messages. It was gut-wrenching because neither of them seemed to care. If I remember correctly, they were talking about a past hookup and how I had no clue, and his response was YOLO. I confronted him about it that night. He begged and pleaded for me to stay. He tried to convince me that they had never actually hooked up. He said it was just a big mistake on his part. He insisted that I matter more than her. But in the end, I knew I could never stay. How could I stay with someone who reduced long-term cheating on his spouse to YOLO? All the begging and pleading was empty, and I knew it. I felt sick for a long time. I moved out and got therapy. I was poor, but honestly, I was much happier after leaving and getting help. I have been happier ever since. Story 4. I was with a woman for 7 years, married, and we had a daughter together. On our child's birthday, she received a phone call and played it off as a wrong number. 20 minutes later, she told me she was having an emotional affair. I asked, "Like on the internet?" She replied, "No, in person." I asked, "Have you slept with them?" She said, "Yes." It turned out the phone call had been from the man's wife, telling my wife that she was dropping him off at our place and that she should tell me. They had been having an affair for 6 months. She had basically no leg to stand on. She claimed abuse and tried to sell everything in the home after I was ejected under the Army's cool-off plan. After the dust cleared, I dropped a bunch of weight, started traveling the world, and took my daughter to places I never imagined. She hates me for it. She is still with him, and they are both hateful and miserable. I thought my life was over then. It turns out it had just begun. Story 5. I kind of knew something was going on, and then my close friends held a pseudo-intervention to let me know I was in a broken relationship. I went and found the guy to talk to him for confirmation. After that, I left and kind of disappeared for a little over a year. I do not think I even talked to anyone during that time. I just spent a lot of time reflecting on who I had become through that relationship, and then spent a great deal of time re-establishing a sense of self-worth. Story 6. I saw her Facebook messages to him, where they were planning a mountain trip. We were separated, trying to work on rebuilding our marriage. Don't ever do that. Just as bad as the affair was the fact that they took my son to see a movie together. I hired a lawyer, filed for divorce, and ended up taking custody of my son, the house, and the dog. She is also paying for me to give me child support, so I have that going for me, which is nice. Story 7. I caught her heavily flirting with people at parties a few times. Then I got deployed and returned. She showed up late for my unit's arrival after drinking a six-pack of beer. She left my son and me soon after to do drugs and live with the man I can only assume she had been seeing. Her best friend at the time told me she had cheated on me. We divorced, and I remarried later to a great person. I also worked hard and built a successful career in cybersecurity. My son is doing well, and I have had full custody since we split. She is not a big part of his life. Story 8. My ex-wife was having an affair with a fellow coworker. One night, I was hanging out with my daughter, who was about 10 at the time, when I got a knock on the door. It was one of my wife's coworkers, someone I had never met, telling me that my wife was at a restaurant with a coworker and that I should know. I drove to the restaurant and saw her with a man having dinner. I threw my ring on the ground in the restaurant and told her she could have it. The next day, after talking to my wife's sister, I agreed to speak with my wife. We talked it out, and I said I would need some time to figure things out. The following day, a man showed up at my work and handed me an envelope saying I might want to see these. Inside were pictures of my wife and her coworker kissing, time-stamped the day after I had caught them at the restaurant. It turned out all her coworkers had seen what she was doing and felt they should tell me. I kicked her to the curb and never looked back. Story 9. He felt guilty, so he started being less covert about it. It slowly became apparent. His cheating was not just physical, it was a relationship. He was buying her gifts, taking her out, fixing her car for her, and as he got more involved, he was obviously spending more time away from home. I am not naturally suspicious or jealous, so at first I thought they were just friends. He finally told me he wanted a divorce, still not admitting that it was an affair, and insisting they were only friends. I asked for 3 months of counseling before we decided for sure whether to split up. He agreed, but he didn't put in much effort as he was already 1 foot out the door. I could not stand being in that house with him anymore, so I found a cute little place to rent on Craigslist and moved out. I took the cat with me. She and I set up a home together and got on with our lives. It was a really hard time, but I am grateful for the direction my life took afterward. I had not realized how much that relationship was holding me back from doing and being what I wanted. Story 10. We never technically got married, we were engaged. We had been together for 5 years. I proposed, and she said yes. 2 weeks before our wedding was to happen, I got off work early and came home to find her with some scraggly, homeless-looking man in our bed. Instead of doing something drastic, my first instinct was to walk out. I stayed at my parents' house for a couple of days. When I returned, she was gone, taking half my stuff with her. I went to her work. She had quit and no one had seen her. I called her parents, but they would not talk to me. I never even got the ring back. A year later, a Facebook notification popped up under People You Might Know. The profile picture was her in a wedding dress next to the man I had caught her with. So maybe she is happy. I do not know. I spent the next 2 years constantly drunk and ended up doing something really stupid. It was unsuccessful, but I still think about trying again sometimes. I went through major depression and self-worth issues that I do not think I am fully over even now. I am off the booze and doing better than I was, but it still weighs on me every day. Story 11. One evening, my wife told me, I do not want to be married to you anymore. The next morning, I told her that if she did not want to be married, she should probably leave. She said she would not leave me alone with our kids because I was a danger to them. I had very good reason to suspect she was cheating on me. That afternoon, I called the other man out of the blue and said, I know my wife no longer loves me. I know she loves you. I can respect that, but I need you both to not interfere with my relationship with my children. There was a long pause, and then he unwittingly confirmed my suspicion. That evening, my now ex-wife told me that despite what she had said in the morning, I was not a danger to our kids and she would be finding a new place to live. I would like to say the crazy dialed down from there, but it did not. Sociopaths and narcissists bring their own level of chaos. At least now I have an amazing and wonderful relationship with one of my children. Story 12. He was acting like a completely different person. Our fights became more toxic, the intimacy had completely stopped, and he went out of his way to never be alone with me. These were all red flags, so I snooped through his phone and found messages confirming his cheating. We had gotten together right out of high school and had our oldest child soon after. 4 months later, I became pregnant with our youngest, so we were trying to figure out how to be parents, adults, and partners all at once with no support. After the initial screaming match, we sat down and figured out where we had gone wrong. Some of it as a couple, some of it due to outside influences, but mostly personal issues we had never addressed. We started from square one. We both went into therapy for our personal issues, I went back on my medication, and then we moved out of state. We learned how to fight fairness, slowly rebuild trust, and maintained open lines of communication. 3 years later, we are still married and doing better than ever. We are still figuring out new obstacles as they arise, but now we face them as a team. Story 13. We had been together for 10 years, married for 2. I flew home for a week to visit family, and when I returned, he told me he realized he did not miss me and wanted to move out. There had been no prior fighting, no issues, no signs at all. He initially said he did not know what he wanted in life and needed space to figure things out, promising he would move back once he had clarity. While he was packing, I found him texting a married coworker. I knew right then, they had apparently been chatting for months, supposedly just as friends. He moved out. 2 months later, she left her husband and kids, and I found out she was pregnant. I filed for divorce and moved far, far away. I do not know if they are still together or married. It just hurts to be betrayed so callously. Story 14. This sounds like a soap opera, but it is true. My high school sweetheart and the father of my 2 oldest kids went MIA. I called his mother's house, and his friend answered. I asked for my boyfriend, and he asked if this was Angie. I said no. Who is Angie? It turned out she was his new girlfriend, and she was pregnant. I left immediately. A few years later, I had been married to someone else for 4 years. My ex was married to someone else, and I suspected my husband was cheating. His ex-wife was picking up the kids for the weekend and asked if my husband and I were okay. It turned out my husband's truck was at Angie's house when she picked up my ex's daughter. I drove over, saw the truck, knocked on the door, and guess who answered? Shirtless. My husband. A big fight ensued, and I kicked him out. Angie was not gorgeous or irresistible. She looked awful, but the betrayal was still stung. A couple of years later, I got married, and still am 18 years later. At a bar, watching a friend perform, Angie showed up. I pointed her out and threatened with serious consequences if my husband ever even looked at her. Shortly after, she contacted me on Facebook asking why I did not like her. I was flabbergasted. How could she not know? Story 15. My ex-wife's guitar teacher, whom I had gotten her for Christmas, was acting cagey around me when I went to get bass strings for myself. He talked to me and said he wasn't sure if I was there to confront him, and since I was friendly, he assumed the note he received was true. What note, you ask? The note my ex-wife had given him said I was okay with an open marriage and that she really wanted to get drinks with him. The exact words were, I really want to get a drink with you and a bit more. It's okay, my husband knows and is cool with it. We have an open marriage. I wasn't mad at him. Hello? I wasn't even mad at her. Had she been honest, I probably would have been down for an open arrangement. But she lied to both me and him. I kept the note, showed it to her, and told her I was done. I ended up meeting my current wife that very night, but that's another story. Story 16. She got involved with another man. I knew something was wrong because things had felt off for weeks. Getting her to tell me the truth was like pulling teeth every step of the way. She asked for a divorce, and I gave it to her willingly. I followed standard advice, forgot about Facebook, hit the gym, hired a lawyer, and made entirely new friends in my late 20s. Life is so much better now than I thought it could be, even when I was married. Story 17. I wasn't married, but we were engaged at the time. A few months before our wedding, she was spending more time with a coworker, staying out until 2 a.m., and lying about where she was. She called off the wedding and confessed that she had cheated on me with this man. I was willing to try to save the relationship. A week later, on the night that was supposed to be her bachelorette party, she planned to go out with some girlfriends and invited him along, lying to me about it. We broke up the next day. Story 18. We had dated for 9 years and had been married for less than a month. We rushed into marriage because of insurance issues. She needed surgery, and I was in the process of being tested to see if I could donate part of my liver to her. She became more distant, and I kept trying harder. I noticed she was always on my computer and texting a man who claimed to be just a friend. I got fed up and installed a keylogger, which revealed it was much more. She told him she would rather be with him and discussed what to do if I tried to sleep with her. I found this out after driving home an hour from work and reading everything. I woke her up, threw my ring against the wall, and told her to leave. She ended up moving in with him and marrying him. Apparently, the bartender had overheard her talking to the man before the ceremony, saying she wasn't sure if she could go through with it. Luckily, I found my perfect match much later, and I couldn't be happier with her and our daughter. Story 19. He came home one evening after 16 years of marriage and said, "We're in trouble." I asked if he had lost his job or forgotten to pay the mortgage. He said he had a 5-year-old and another child on the way. We already had a 15 and 13-year-old. There was a moment of confusion. Then the light bulb went on. I saw a divorce attorney a few days later. She had been going with him on business trips and was in our house when I was at work, and the kids were at school. I moved out 15 days after finding all of this out. This was 17 years ago. Story 20. My now ex-wife worked for a bank. She started keeping odd hours and wasn't as quick to answer her phone as she once had been. She eventually came to me and said she wasn't happy and wanted out. I agreed that the wind had left our sails some time ago. When I went to look at a new phone while still on her AT&T account, she became very protective of her password and wouldn't give it to me. I just wanted to see what it would cost to have my own plan. After an argument in front of our young son, I dropped it. Later, around 2 a.m., I discovered a way to log in using a secondary number and obtain a temporary password. Once in, I found the itemized calls and texts from the last billing cycle. One number stood out, hundreds of messages, day and night. It belonged to a loan officer she worked with at the bank. I called and confronted him, thanking him for saving me the wasted time of trying to reconcile. My son had already told me he wanted to go wherever I did, so I already had the upper hand in a no-win situation. Because I had caught her months of deception, I gained custody of our son, took everything out of the house that wasn't nailed down, and she bought me out of my half of our starter home. After some initial anxiety, my son and I adjusted well. I received child support, though she missed payment once. On behalf of fathers everywhere, both custodial and non-custodial, I publicly reminded her at one of my son's soccer matches not to let child support be the last thing she thought about each month. Was it a jerk move? Yes. Did it feel great? Absolutely. Story 21. This is my guy friend's story. She cheated on him during her bachelorette party in Las Vegas. I don't know exactly how he found out, but he forgave her and went through with the wedding and marriage. He noticed she was taking longer to respond to his calls and messages, but didn't think much of it. One day, he got out of court early and decided to hang out at the country club while she finished her job, something she had no idea about. A few hours went by, and he texted her asking for her ETA. She said things were running behind because the boardroom in the country club was booked. He called her out on the lie because he was there and knew for a fact the room had not been used all day. She then said she was on her way from the parking lot. The country club has two sets of elevators. One set accesses the hotel rooms and members-only section, and the other is for the parking area. He was waiting in the lobby when his wife came out of the elevators for the hotel rooms/members-only section with bedhead and messy clothes. At that point, he knew what was going on. She did too, and broke down right there. She revealed she had kept in touch with the man she slept with during her bachelorette party. He was from out of town, but happened to be in the city for work, so they decided to meet up. My friend tried to work past it by going to counseling to save their marriage. A few weeks later, after he relocated out of town for a short-term contract, he received an email from her saying she would rather focus on their separation than their marriage. They separated, got divorced, and now he is slowly repairing the emotional damage caused by her betrayal with girls half his age. Story 22. I had been suspicious of my ex for a while but was in denial, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Her best friend had recently split up with her husband, so they were hanging out together again, just going out. I even said, "You're gonna get jealous of her getting attention at some point," and she insisted, No, I just want to hang out and have a few drinks, that's all. I eventually had a work meeting in another state, so I was gone Sunday through Thursday. When I returned, we took a shuttle back to the office and everyone's rides were there but mine. She never showed up to pick me up. I called and texted her and she answered about 20 minutes later saying she was on her way. She arrived looking disheveled and awkward with no sense of caring that I had been gone for a week. At home, I took my suitcase to the laundry room to start washing my clothes. When I headed back toward the bedroom to put the suitcase away, she was coming out of the bathroom with her hair and makeup fixed. I asked, "What's going on?" She said, "I'm going back out." When I asked, "Back out?" she got defensive. "That's not what I meant. Quit being so controlling," I said. "I just got home. I've been gone a week." But she blew it off, said she had plans with her friends and left. I went to bed alone. The next morning, she was already getting out of the shower with a packed bag. I asked when she got home and she said she didn't know because she didn't look at the clock. I asked about the bag. She said her friend was having a house party and invited her to stay for the weekend. Then she left. She didn't come home until around 9:30 on Sunday night. She occasionally returned my texts, claiming they were partying. By this point, I was very suspicious, so I asked her to send a picture of everyone there. She went to the radio silently, later claiming she had lost her phone in the couch. That night, I told her it was over and that I knew she was cheating. She flipped out and I calmly let her go on. When she stopped, I said, "Give me your phone." She refused. I said, "Then you have something on there you don't want me to see, and I assume it's evidence you're cheating." She packed a bag and left. I did more digging and found a social media account of a guy with pictures of her from that weekend, which was most conveniently stamped date. I saved them all. A few weeks later, she tried to get back together. I shut her down. She went into full-blown rage mode, threatening to come after my retirement funds, house, and truck. Her parents even emailed me, saying they hope I have a good lawyer. I emailed them back the pictures of her and the guy, writing, "I won't need a lawyer. Good luck." The next time I heard from her was when she got the letter notifying her of our divorce hearing date. Last I heard, she is living in another state with a child on the way, having burned nearly every bridge here. I hope she has matured, but I sincerely doubt she can admit anything she did was wrong. Story 23. I started to post this on another thread, but here's the full story. My ex-wife had problems, but the way she handled things was completely wrong. She started talking to a man she met on a gaming website, Pogo. She claimed he was just a friend. Then she began talking to him on the phone in front of me, still insisting he was only a friend. I should mention that he lived in another state, where my ex-wife also had a girlfriend. One Easter, she took my daughter to visit her girlfriend. I could not attend because I did not have time off. While she was there, one day I could not get in touch with her. It turned out she had gone to meet the man while her girlfriend watched our child. When she eventually came home, she told me she did not want to be married anymore and wanted to move away with our daughter to live with this man. I was scared out of my mind and still am to this day, so I allowed her to go. They did move back, but it was still the worst decision I ever made. I missed out on 3 years of my daughter's life. I eventually moved on and got remarried, but I still have doubts in my current marriage because of what happened with my ex-wife. Story 24. Our marriage was falling apart to the point where I had moved into my own apartment. However, we were in therapy and things seemed to be improving. She had to attend a conference in Atlantic City and asked me to stay at our house for the week. We were texting consistently throughout the week, flirty and positive. One day, while working on my laptop at the house, I didn't realize my knockoff Apple charger was overheating and soon stopped working. I asked my now ex-wife if I could use her laptop. She said yes, so I continued working. Her laptop was set up to receive texts, and I noticed a small notification in the corner. At some point, she sent me a picture of a stray puppy walking along the boardwalk. I replied in a way that implied I thought it was her mother's new dog. She must have been texting her mom about this potential new dog and misinterpreted my response as me reading her private messages. She freaked out. I was surprised by her reaction but already knew how irrational and nasty she could be. We cleared up the misunderstanding quickly. Later that night, I had a powerful epiphany. She was hiding something on her phone. During a moment of weakness and lack of respect for her privacy, I browsed her laptop and found a detailed texting conversation with her coworker. Story 25. My ex-wife was very covert about cheating. She had spent years sneaking around behind her parents with me when we first met. I trusted her, she was my wife, and there's not much of a marriage without trust. She made one fatal mistake. She told her little sister about it. The problem was that her little sister liked me and hated her. She had no idea. My little spy told me everything. I tossed her out of the house and left her. A really crappy way to end a 10-year marriage. Story 26. I walked into my best friend's house because I had offered to clean it for free. She had a lot on her plate. One of the things on her plate, apparently, was my husband, in her bed. I walked out. When he came home, I asked him where he had been. He lied. A week later, I left after stuffing dog waste into every vent I could find in his brand new truck. It was a hot week and he had to take the car while traveling. He had to get rid of the truck. Pity. Story 27. My husband started a new job. A few months in, he began acting differently, but I didn't think much of it. He started hanging out with coworkers after work, which I was fine with. I wanted him to have a social life. Eventually, he was constantly texting coworkers and going out about once a week. In a moment I am not proud of, I checked his Facebook messages. I had never violated his privacy like that before, and sometimes wish I hadn't. He had been seeing a coworker for months. I was pregnant. It was a huge mess. We have mostly worked things out, but it still hurts, even after 3 years. Story 28. I know this will make me sound dumb, and it probably does. Before we were married, we moved in together. While searching for the apartment, he was adamant about choosing one place. I didn't care if I was with him. We moved in, and things were great at first. There were some odd behaviors, but I ignored them, like him waking up in the middle of the night and disappearing or reading texts in another room. I trusted him and didn't want to be intrusive. One day, he left Facebook open on our laptop and received a message. It turned out his ex lived across the street from that apartment. She was asking if he was coming over that night. When I confronted him, he admitted he had been going over there but said she wasn't the one he had been texting. That was someone else. Here's where I made my mistake. I forgave him. Things were fine for a while and we got married. Within 6 months, he was cheating again. This time, I found out when the neighbor showed up at my workplace and told me directly. That was the final straw. I left him. By then, things were already falling apart, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Story 29. My parents divorced because of cheating. They both worked irregular hours that did not line up, so while my mom was working most of the day and my brother and I were at school, my father was having affairs. She eventually found out through small things, like breakfast dishes being in the exact same place she had left them, which made her realize he had not been home all day. Story 30. This is happening to me right now. I am 38, married, and have a young child. I felt something was off. Things just did not feel right. Call it intuition. One day she went out running early and left her phone at home. So I checked it. In the 13 years we had known each other, I had never felt the need to do that. I found all kinds of incriminating evidence. I was shocked and devastated, and I still am. Over the past few weeks, she admitted she no longer loves me and is in the early stages of seeing another man. I am calling a divorce lawyer this week to get things started. This whole situation really hurts. I thought we were an unstoppable team. We had been through the deaths of both my parents, pets, and more, and we built a life together with our child. But she felt disconnected and chose someone new. instead of trying to fix things. Sometimes I wish I had never checked her phone just to keep the family together a little longer, but I know this is for the best. Story 31. I was in graduate school, working with a toddler and a newborn. Then suddenly my ex had friends. He had never really had any before, but now he was going out with work friends after hours. One night I finished my homework early. My mom was visiting to help with the kids, and I told her I felt like something was off. She suggested I go to meet him at the bar where he said he was. I agreed, thinking it might ease my mind. When I got there were no work friends. In fact, there was no one there at all. I called him. He claimed they had moved to another bar but could not remember the name or location. He said he would just meet me at home. That was the moment I knew. He trickled me for a while, and it was awful. Somehow, I still wanted to make it work. I agreed to ridiculous conditions, like letting him keep his relationship with her while I had to earn him back. Eventually, he told me it would be easier to just get divorced. He walked away, and I didn't. Looking back, I cannot believe how much I let myself be treated like a doormat. Later, I discovered he had a plan for me to essentially disappear so he could keep the house, the kids, everything. Ironically, he was barely seeing the kids at all. According to him, he was too busy with work, the girlfriend, yoga, Yet somehow I was supposed to vanish. That was when I finally snapped out of it and filed for divorce. He went around telling anyone who would listen that it was all my fault, that I filed out of nowhere because I did not want to share the kids. I was even publicly yelled at by someone I barely knew for taking a father away from my children. The court process dragged on for years and cost a fortune, all over custody for children he barely made time to see. The joint custody I offered was not enough. He wanted full custody and full control. In the end, it was the best thing he ever did for me. I would have stayed with him forever, even though the marriage was miserable. Now I have a life I truly love. I have worked on myself, learned to respect myself, and my kids are thriving. Story 32. She was pregnant with my daughter and sleeping with a coworker in our home while I was at work. I had my suspicions, so I set up a security camera with a DVR. When she found it and kept unplugging it, that alone confirmed everything. I gathered what evidence I could from her computer and confronted her. After having enough pressure, she admitted it. We tried to work things out, but it felt like I had to trap her into telling the truth every time, like she would only confess when she had no other option. A few months later, my daughter was born, and I was struggling with serious trust issues. Instead of working through them with me, she constantly insulted and belittled me. Eventually, I snapped and asked for her phone. She refused, then decided to leave. She took our daughter and went back to her parents' house where she still lives along with the same guy, even though she denies it. I did not see my daughter for over 2 months. If I tried, she would call the police. At that point, I no longer cared about the relationship. I just wanted to be a father. After spending $11,000 on legal fees, I finally got joint custody, 50-50, but I still must pay for child support. We were together for 10 years and married for 1.5. I still do not know what changed in her. She struggled with depression and we suspected bipolar disorder, but she refused to get help. Story 33. My husband came home crying one day. A hypochondriac, he was convinced that his various health issues, likely caused by heavy drinking, smoking, lack of sleep, and poor eating, meant he had AIDS. He had already gone to get tested and was panicking while waiting for the results. I told him that it made no sense. I had been tested for everything during my pregnancy with our son, who was 2 at the time. That was when he admitted there had been an incident about a year earlier. So he had spent an entire year thinking he might have a serious disease that could have affected his wife and child. Even then, I tried to make it work. I gave it a few months to see if he would change, but there were already many other problems. By that point, I was 6 months into focusing on my health and turning my life around. When it became clear he was not going to change, I left. I was young and in the best shape of my life. I eventually met an incredible man, successful, kind, and everything I could have hoped for. We now have a wonderful life together, traveling the world, and he has adopted my son. And no one had AIDS. Story 34. We had been married for 5 years. I was deployed on a 12-month Army tour and came home for mid-tour leave, which lasted about a week. The first night back, she was in the shower, and I got on the computer. When it woke from sleep mode, her Facebook inbox was open, filled with conversations from men I had never heard of. I only needed to read the first one to understand what was going on. I spent the rest of my leave moving my belongings into a storage unit before returning to my deployment. She is not doing well now, which is sad. I was awarded full custody of our daughter and have been raising her as a single parent ever since. In the end, things worked out for me and my child. Story 35. I felt that something was off. Small details in our daily life did not add up. She began putting more effort into her appearance, encouraged me to work more, something she had never done before, and started taking her phone everywhere. She was not very tech-savvy, and I had set up our phones and accounts, so I used a tracking feature to check her location. Sure enough, she was not where she said she would be. One day, I put the kids in the car and drove to the location. I found her in a parking lot in the back seat of a car with someone I knew from work. That was all I needed to see. Story 36. We had been engaged for several years and were planning to get married that summer. We had tried to have a baby, but I miscarried just before Christmas. I did not realize how deeply it affected me at the time, but I had become depressed. After supporting her through her own mental health and personal struggles, I hoped she would be there for me. Instead, she felt overwhelmed and began a relationship with a straight, married friend. I grew suspicious but hoped it would pass. Then on Valentine's Day, I found them together in my home. The three of us had a long, tense conversation, but by that point, I was done. In a way, it felt fitting that two people willing to cheat had found each other. Now I am trying to find a new place to live, as I cannot afford to keep the house on my own. She can. I hope things remain civil, but I am not sure how I will learn to trust again. Story 37. A friend's boss caught his wife cheating. Their relationship had already been strained, and she had been acting differently. He found a bit of proof but decided to go further than just confronting her. He hired a private investigator to track her. Within a month, he had a binder full of evidence, photos, videos, credit card receipts, phone records, everything. Then, out of nowhere, she asked for a divorce. He stayed calm and simply said, "Okay, I'll see you in court." On the first day, she demanded the house, the kids, substantial child support, and half his retirement. In response, he presented the binder as evidence and offered her $50,000 in cash to walk away. The shock on her face was undeniable. Her lawyer advised her that she was lucky to receive that, so she accepted the deal. The man she had been seeing left her about 6 months later. She burned through the money within a few years, despite still working, and eventually had to move back in with her parents in her mid-30s. Story 38. We were together for 5 years and married for 9 months. It was not the first time she had cheated on me, but I ignored the warning signs. I was working night shifts and getting ready to leave for work when she was in the bath, grooming herself, something she often did before meeting someone else. She said she was going out with friends, but it turned out to be a guy she had been talking to for about a month. I lost my temper, we argued, and I left for work. When I came back, she was not home. She was with him, that was the end of it. For months afterward, she blamed me, saying that if I had not reacted the way I did, she would not have sought out someone else. But this was far from the first time she had cheated, so I knew that was not true. After the divorce was finalized, she admitted her plan had been to sleep with him and then come home and sleep with me a few hours later. So I would not suspect anything. I was young and ignored all the warnings from friends and family. My best man even asked me right before the wedding if I was sure I wanted to go through with it. Now I have been with my second wife for 10 years. We have 3 amazing kids, and I could not be happier. Story 39. My wife used to take evening classes once a week. During that time, I would go to a friend's place to play Dungeons & Dragons and video games. After a few weeks, I noticed the host was starting to flirt with me, and I felt tempted. For several weeks, I considered staying behind after everyone else left to see what might happen, but I never liked the idea of being unfaithful, so I let the temptation pass. About 12 years later, I came home drunk one night and for some reason stopped my wife in the hallway and blurted out that I had never cheated on her except with my hand. Something about that seemed to trigger something in her. She acted strangely for a few days, and then one evening she broke down and confessed that she had cheated on me years earlier with one of her teachers from those classes. It happened a couple of times and then ended. The timing was strange, as nothing else in our lives had prompted such a confession. I thought about it for several days before deciding to forgive her. It happened long ago, and it did not affect our day-to-day life together. To be honest, I had come very close to doing the same thing back then, so it was hard to judge her too harshly. 10 years after her confession, we are still together. What I have learned is that people can be weak and make mistakes. I resisted temptation that time, but I have failed in other ways, and she has supported me through those moments. I have also seen her struggle and grow over the years. This was one of those moments, an old mistake made when we were younger. After everything we built together, I was not willing to let it destroy our life. Story 40. She told me she had been drinking and slept with one of her female friends. Normally, that's something I wouldn't have been upset about, but there were other circumstances that made her infidelity sting more than it should have. I took a long time to decide what to do. We tried to work through it, and eventually one night she told me she was moving out. I told her that was a good idea, and in that moment it felt like we were on even ground. We essentially started from scratch. Though there have been ups and downs since, I can honestly say that we are happier than we have ever been. Story 41. Many years ago, I was out at a restaurant with my ex and her friends. I had just given her my old cell phone because I had upgraded to a new one. When she got up to go to the restroom, I instinctively picked up the phone. It felt casual, and I didn't think twice about it. In the middle of a conversation, I saw some very flirtatious messages on the screen between her and an unknown number. I immediately knew something was wrong. It turned out she had been growing close to a colleague. To my knowledge, it didn't become physical, but they are together now. Ultimately, it was for the best. I'm now very happily married to someone who is a better partner for me. I hope she is happy as well. Story 42. My wife and I married in our early 20s. About a year into our marriage, I was struggling with self-worth and withdrew emotionally. I wasn't a good husband at the time, and she told me that if I didn't get help, she would leave me. A few months later, she did leave. I later found out she had been having an emotional affair with a man from work during the last few months we were together. She slept with him the day she moved out. He was married, 15 years older than her, and had children. I tried to convince her to go to counseling, but she never showed up. Looking back, I feel weak for wanting to try to make it work. I've talked to her since, and I don't believe she was truly sorry. I'm in a much better place now. That was the toughest experience of my life, and I truly loved her. But I got the help I needed, and I'm doing well. I often think about how things might have been different if I had gotten my act together sooner. Story 43. I was in the hospital giving birth to our first child, a son. He didn't show up for labor or birth. Even 24 hours later, he was still MIA. I was beside myself with worry, imagining he'd been in an accident or was lying sick at home. I sent my mother to check on him. He was more than okay. Through the bedroom window, my mother saw him in bed with my best friend, who was also our neighbor. She rushed back to the hospital and told me what she had seen. I demanded to be released immediately and had my mother drive me home. By the time we got there, he had already left for the hospital, and my best friend was back at her house, fuming. I started throwing his clothes and belongings out the door in the rain, littering the yard. My best friend came over, feigning happiness that I was home, and I promptly punched her in the face, knocking out a front tooth. I called her every name in the book and ordered her out of my life and off my property. He initially claimed my mother was lying, but eventually, my best friend convinced him to admit the truth. He even tried to make me jealous by asking if he could move in with her, but she dumped him immediately. 5 months later, we were officially divorced, and I was a single mother. No regrets. 5 years later, I met the love of my life. We dated for 2 years, got married, and recently celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary. I'm as in love now as I was the first day. In hindsight, my ex did me a huge favor. Story 44. We'd been together for 17 years, married for 11. My son was using my wife's computer and complaining it wasn't working properly. As I sat down to inspect it, I noticed my wife's email was open, and the deleted items folder was completely empty. She had never emptied it since I'd known her. I snooped a bit further and found 17 emails from a guy I knew in her sent items. Reading them broke my heart. They'd been seeing each other for a while and were planning a dirty weekend, trying to figure out how to get me to look after the kids. I briefly thought about going to his house to physically confront him, but it came to my senses. Why go to jail over 2 lowlives? So my method of getting even was this. I picked 6 of the more explicit emails and forwarded them to every single contact in my wife's Outlook, her parents, siblings, friends, his family, our accountant, everyone, with the headline, "Have a read of this." It was simple but extremely effective. There was no he said, she said. Everyone knew exactly why I left. During the divorce, my ex asked, "Out of all the things you could have done, why did you send those emails?" Silver lining, around the time we parted, internet dating was taking off. Over the last few years, I've dated more attractive women than ever before. Life's funny sometimes. Story 45. I'm married for 10 years to someone I'd known since high school, even worked together during our 20s. When she approached her 27th birthday, I was preparing for a trip to DC and noticed a text on her phone saying, "I can't wait until this weekend." She didn't deny it and said we'd talk about it when I returned. I tried multiple times to work it out and understand why. I even considered confronting her coworker aggressively, but ended up just asking him why it happened. As expected, there was no good answer. In the end, just like her father, she ended up having 3 to 4 kids with a man who already had 2 kids by different women. They still live together, and every once in a while, I get a message when an elder family passes away. Karma is real. My life is better in the new house. Travel, partner, and room to grow. Even when it feels like it won't, life gets better. Story 46. It was obvious in hindsight, we were both unhappy but had gone too far to quit. I had moved across the country to be with her because I believed in true love. She called off the wedding about 4 months before it was supposed to happen, which broke me. I told her I wanted to stay together and try to fix things. 1 week later, she woke me up after I'd gone to bed and admitted she had cheated the week prior, after calling off the wedding. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her to get the hell out of my apartment. I haven't really seen her since. The following year involved a lot of drinking and smoking, but I got through it. I've now met the woman of my dreams and have a child on the way. Best advice, if you're unhappy, move on. No point dragging out a situation you know deep down isn't working. Story 47. I suspected something when she seemed to be chatting with someone more than playing the game, World of Warcraft. I decided to set up a chat logger in WoW that night. I was in school at the time, so I called in sick to go have some Chinese food with a friend who was also playing WoW. Later that night, I went home and confirmed my suspicion. Explicit chat. I confronted her and she acted as though it was no big deal, offering some stories. I had a feeling that was not the case. I didn't tell her I had discovered her plans to meet the guy. I told her I needed to spend the night at my grandma's. Snagged the spare turnpike transponder we hadn't yet mounted and called a buddy. He agreed to lend me his car but had a raid going on so he couldn't. I called another buddy who was happy to help. The next day, I parked down the street from the house in a car she didn't recognize and waited for her to leave. I followed her halfway across the state to confirm the meeting, then drove past a couple times deciding how to proceed. Finally, I decided to take the car she was driving. My name was on the title, so I had no fear of theft charges. I switched seats with my buddy. He pulled up next to them in a parking lot. I jumped out, walked over, reached into her pocket, and took her keys. I locked the car, said a few choice words to the two of them, and hopped back into the borrowed car. The guy began acting tough, so we decided to bail and had lunch at the local Chili's. After an hour or two, we figured they had at least moved away from the car. I ran back, jumped in, and drove off. We returned to town. I loaded the car with some of my belongings, then returned the borrowed car. I had family out of state, so I drove a few hours to stay with them. Took a couple of days off to think about my next steps. I eventually decided to bail, filed for divorce, and ended up finding someone soon after. I've been happy since. Story 48. I was blindsided last October. She told me she had slept with 3 different men while I was deployed with the Navy, and the most recent one was a special friend she had met a few weeks earlier. Then she said she would stay married but wouldn't stop talking to or seeing him. I filed for divorce that day. She took all the furniture and belongings while I was out of town the next week, stole the dog, and posted lovey-dovey photos of her with her new boyfriend on Facebook. I now live in my brother's guest bedroom, and all my belongings fit into 2 carry-on size suitcases. 0 out of 10, will never marry again. Story 49. My wife cheated on me. The man she was cheating with was married too, and his wife called me at work, cussing me out because I could not control my wife. When I tried to control her, she got a restraining order. I lost my house and about 75% of my belongings, roughly $450,000 worth. So I do not recommend marriage or women in general. I stayed out of jail though, so I have that going for me, which is nice, I guess. If it's too late for you and you're already suffering under the broken laws in this country, my condolences. I just wish the state would require men to read these threads and pass a test before issuing marriage licenses. Story 50. I had a gut feeling that my wife was having an affair. One night, I went through her phone and found texts saying she was with another man. I checked the time. It was when I was working 3rd shift, literally about an hour after I left for work. What made it worse was that we had a 6-month-old daughter, and she had been around him. I took the phone back to my daughter's room and just sat there, watching over her. When my wife woke up and asked what I was doing, I turned around, snapped her phone in half, and told her to ask the guy she was sleeping with. I lost control. I threw things around the house, punched the refrigerator, then got in my car and drove about 110 miles per hour down a backcountry road. When I came back, I didn't say a word, just checked on my daughter. I stayed up all night outside. The next morning, I went to the store, bought 5 cases of beer, and drank all weekend. No sleep, no food. I was in a bad place. I had my in-laws take my daughter for the weekend so she wouldn't be around it. It was a rough time and it still affects me. I have serious trust issues because of it. Story 51. A friend of mine couldn't stand keeping it from me, so he told me while we were out at a bar one night. I went home and packed all my things the next day. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Once she was gone, I realized how much better my life was without her. I enjoyed being single for a couple of years before I met the woman of my dreams. That was 5 years ago. I'm remarried now and have no complaints. Honestly, I'm glad my first wife cheated and I might never have found happiness otherwise. Story 52. I had suspected something was off but had no solid evidence until I got a job with a cell carrier. An extra perk was a free phone for me and a second line with all the perks for just $15. The first bill came itemized. I noticed she was calling the same number every day, several times a day, often for more than an hour. It was a guy. She was calling him while she was supposed to be at work. I asked her who it was and she lied, saying it was one of her girlfriends. When I confronted her with the lie, she accused me of cheating and left a couple of days later. Thank God there were no kids and no property to speak of. I didn't dodge the bullet, but I only suffered a flesh wound. Story 53. I was pregnant. He came home at 3 a.m., even though he got off work at 9 p.m. I was worried. He came back with a gallon of milk and said he'd been at the stored flag number 1. I checked his phone and saw text from a girl at his work talking about intimate things. I was almost on my due date, and even though I knew it wasn't good, I chose to stay after he claimed it was just how he talked with his work friends. Red flag number 2. Finally, we decided to move 150 miles away to my hometown. He backed out at the last minute, saying he would come after he found a job. He never came. Instead, he got his work friend pregnant and never saw our kids again. He didn't pay for child support. Jokes on me for being so dumb. Story 54. My brother's wife had been cheating on him for 5 out of the 7 years they were married. She even let the other guy sleep over at their house, and my brother was fine with it because he trusted her. I even met him once at a party. One day, she coldly sat him down and told him the truth. She said she only admitted it because the other guy was catching serious feelings and was about to out her, while she was committed to continuing the lie. It was a complete shock to all of us. Everyone in my family trusted and loved her. It's been a year, and he is still devastated. He still wears his ring and tells my father he doesn't want anyone else but her. I wish he would understand that someone willing to do that doesn't deserve his love. He is an amazing guy. Story 55. I wasn't married, but maybe 7 months after he dumped me for not prioritizing him, a girl I knew reached out and asked if I had ever dated him. I said yes for 2 years. She asked if I was sure. It was 2 years. I said yes. She informed me that my relationship with him overlapped her relationship with him by 5 months. Although we had been broken up for a while, I was totally crushed, confused, and furious. I called him and basically told him shame on him for manipulating me into thinking I had failed and hadn't tried hard enough. I think she's still with him, but I moved on a lot faster once I found out. Story 56. I found out from her phone. She had passed out drunk with her fingers on the screen so the phone hadn't locked. She was having an emotional, long-distance affair with someone we once met while on vacation. The phone was open to a chat with him. I only noticed when I took it from her hand so I could tuck her in. I also discovered they had planned a trip together. That one really hurt. She eventually canceled it when she realized how much it affected me. She said she thought I didn't care about her anymore. We're having problems now, and the future is one big question mark. I'm not blameless. I never cheated or tried to, but I wasn't perfect either. I'm trying to fix things. I've made real progress, and she sees that I've changed, but she has fallen out of love with me. I don't know what we're going to do. She still talks to that guy, and that must stop if we're going to heal. He helped her through some emotionally rough times, so there's a connection there. I even have screenshots of emails he sent her from his work account. Some of them are explicit. I sometimes wonder if I should send them to his company's HR department and try to get him fired. I'm sure it violates company policy, but what I really want is for her to stop so we can heal. I still love her deeply. I just don't know if she'll ever love me the same way again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.